Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everyone's doing okay. My name's Got Cake and this is an SOS review of Red Death, a retro-inspired bullet hell vertical shooter which just released today on the Nintendo Switch. Before we get started, remember to like the video if you enjoyed the review and subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified of future indie game reviews which are uploaded on a regular basis. So Red Death was originally released on Steam in March 2017 and it generally gets favourable ratings. But of course, bullet hell games sit among the most punishing of game genres and it's understandable that this game isn't going to be for everybody. The game opens with Red 1 flying high above a cityscape. Command contacts you and informs you that there's some weird shit going on and that you'll see it with your own eyes as opposed to somebody else's eyes. You then gain control of your ship and the game begins. Immediately noticeable is the game's aspect ratio, which actually appears to be pretty common amongst games of this genre. The controls are simple for the game with only 3 buttons used. Firstly, you have your fire button, which is self-explanatory. You basically just hold down the button, so I'm not sure why it couldn't have just been auto fire. Secondly, you've got the overload button, which we'll come on to a bit later. And lastly you have the slowdown button, which you'll be using a lot, which I'll also cover shortly. So the first 30 seconds or so are pretty relaxed with the game throwing a few enemies at you, which you just have to blast away whilst avoiding the projectiles that they fire. It's important to note that when you kill an enemy, all of its projectiles on screen will also be destroyed. A couple of the enemies here will also drop these ship pickups, which will grant you an extra couple of lives, which believe me, you're gonna need. After passing through a small canyon, shit gets real, and the difficulty instantly ramps up a notch as 3 of these winged eyeball bastards appear and send a barrage of bullets your way. And unless you get incredibly lucky, I guarantee this is where you'll experience your first death. Any contact with an enemy or one of the projectiles will see you explode and lose a ship. Upon dying, you'll drop a power-up pickup, which I advise you try and grab as soon as you respawn, as this will increase your ship's firepower, letting you fire 2 projectiles. Making your way through the next set of enemies, you'll eventually kill another enemy which will drop a laser pickup. Now this is the most important pickup in the game, which you're going to want to grab and keep for as long as possible, as it turns your standard ship projectiles into a constant laser beam. The laser provides a massive boost in damage output and it's vital that you don't die, as it'll be lost on death and you'll return to firing normally. After proceeding through a short section where a bunch of enemies fly straight at you, you'll encounter your first sub-boss, a giant skull with an eyeball in its mouth. Now this first encounter isn't particularly difficult and it sort of introduces you to the importance of the slowdown mechanic. Slowdown is active for as long as you hold down the slowdown button and it slows projectiles and movement speed of both you and the enemy. This allows for more precise movement between on-screen projectiles and makes your ship stand out a little bit more by putting markers around it. After blasting the skull away, grabbing a second laser power up and making your way past this next set of enemies, which can also fuck you over if you're not careful, you'll come face to face with the first level's end boss. It's at this point that you'll realise why the laser is so important and necessary if you're going to get any further in the game. If you reach this boss without the laser, then you'll enter a world of pain, as your standard bullets deal fuck all damage in comparison, and you'll really have to focus in order to dodge all the projectiles thrown at you. However, if you do have the laser, this boss is an absolute cakewalk and can be defeated in about 5 seconds. You may also have gained overload at this point, indicated by the bar on the right side of the screen. This bar slowly fills as you defeat enemies, and once filled you can activate overload, which increases your damage even further, giving you 3 laser beams. The meter is rapidly depleted as you fire, and will be reset to 0 if you die at any point and at the beginning of the next stage. The second stage of the game doesn't ease up on you at all, throwing all kinds of shit your way. You have these tentacles which fly in and cut off a portion of your screen, projectiles that come from behind you, and a sub-boss which will annihilate you, unless of course you've got the laser. The second boss of this area is some sort of Egyptian pharaoh and his nails compared to the first boss. His projectiles move in pulses which first come from the boss itself, and then start moving in from either side of the screen, turning the game into some sadistic version of Frogger on steroids. And this was as far as I got in the game before I wrote this review. So I'll sum up my experiences so far after about 2 hours of playing. Having never played a bullet hell game before, I actually found this game pretty accessible. Yeah, it's pretty fucking hard, but as I assume is the case with many games of this type, a lot of your success comes down to memorising enemy movement and projectile patterns. The more times you play a stage, the better you'll get at it, and I found myself able to beat the first stage almost every time after about an hour of playing. There were, however, a couple of things that I found a little disappointing about the game. Firstly was the game's reliance on the laser. Your standard fire is pretty useless against almost every enemy type, so if you lose your laser you're pretty much fucked and may as well restart the game, as bosses are near impossible and just take forever to kill without it. The second thing that I wasn't particularly fond of was the game's choice of palette. Now don't get me wrong, the game's sprite artwork is good and the colour palette is stylish, but the fact that everything is either red, white or black, including your ship, can be a real pain when shit starts flying all over the screen. This is especially noticeable when you die, as your ship flashes for several seconds once it respawns, and this makes it even more difficult to track your ship among the carnage, especially when you're trying to grab the power up which spawns on death. I found myself dying several times in a row against bosses due to me being unable to distinguish my ship amongst all the other on-screen projectiles. This one aspect could have been avoided by simply making the ship a different colour. So now for my rating of Red Death. Well, I've only played the first 2 levels, but based on my experience so far, I've decided to rate the game 2 out of 5 stars. Red Death may not be the best example of the genre, but the game felt accessible, and considering it was my first experience of a true bullet hell game, I actually had a lot of fun playing it. Its relatively generic gameplay mechanics and its heavy reliance on the laser can make the game feel a bit one-dimensional, so it may not really appeal to hardcore fans of these type of games, but there's enough here to get you started in the genre, and it's reasonably priced. You can get the game on the UK Switch eStore, with its price currently reduced by 20% for £3.59, or the US eStore for $3.99. Alternatively, you can get it on Steam at the much lower price of 79p, and the game's also available for Xbox One and PS4 if you're looking to play on those platforms. And that's all for this review of Red Death. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful, please hit that like button. And if you want to be notified of future indie game reviews, or just want to support my channel, then consider subscribing. For now though, I thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, game on.